Fame and Netflix don't define me.
In my head, I was that businesswoman who would shatter all the ceilings. I have never allowed myself to be labeled. If I am defeated, it is because I chose to be defeated.
Our today's guest on Naked was born in India. She was named number 1 on Business Insider's list of 100 coolest people in food and drink, and she's the first British chef and restaurant owner to appear on the famous Netflix show Chef's Table. Welcome by many known Asma Khan. We talked together about how does fame impact one's self-identity as an entrepreneur, and also how do you cope with all that additional pressure that comes with it. It became quite clear in our conversation that defeat is never an option for her. If I'm defeated, it is because I choose to be defeated. Her path to becoming a celebrated chef persona was not at all clear and narrow. Although being one, actually Asma doesn't see herself as an entrepreneur because she never allowed herself to be labeled by anyone. She finds it limiting. Asma is a woman who has built her business in the face of adversity, lack of wider family support, has felt loneliness, but has actually pushed through, largely with the support of a very close network of other women, which we also talk about together. So enjoy Asma's story and her absolute openness and ability to talk about uncomfortable feelings and experiences with such lightness of a fresh air. Enjoy.
This is Naked by The Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. Brought to you by Vladi and Nektarios. And remember, subscribe, follow and rate Naked to help share it with the world. Did you have that moment where at some point you realize you're no longer the lawyer Asma, you're the business builder Asma?
I did, because, very much like you, I think it's this kind of imposter syndrome. You kind of are in it and you think, oh my God, I don't want to be this, and also I think that saying it loud to yourself that I am an entrepreneur kind of burdens you with all the kind of things that you think are associated with being an entrepreneur, which is success, money, fame. Vladi had mentioned, being Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, you're expecting to do something incredible because you then put a label on yourself, which comes with a huge amount of baggage. And the thing is that, I have never allowed myself to be labeled by anyone. And I never labeled myself. And I've often said this, that, especially in this country, I've been now here for almost 30 years, that, I will call myself an immigrant, a Muslim, a mother, an older woman. I'll call myself anything I want. That's what I am that day. Don't put labels on me because there's no box big enough that'll fit me. Because you don't put me in a box. So, for me, I don't think that, to call myself an entrepreneur would have been completely catastrophic for me. Because I have never, ever called myself anything. Because I have always fought against, being bracketed into something, because I've always seen that is where you live the rest of your life. I've seen my mother, my sister, my cousins, all of them bracketed, the pretty one, the dumb one, the clever one, the dark one, the fat one, the thin one. And, when you come from a large family, this is very much from the moment you're born, you are labeled as something. And I was as well labeled as something from birth. So yeah, I still don't call myself an entrepreneur. I know I am one. I know I'm a business person. I know I made a huge, if anyone who's traveled to the subcontinent and, you're in these crazy trains packed with people, you look at a path where the train tracks are splitting, you're suddenly you find your train, moving to another path. I felt that movement when I went to see, my restaurant in King Lear Court. And I looked at it and I thought, I want it. It's going to be really hard to get it because I have no money. I have zero experience. I don't even have a credit card. So they go check my credit history and find zero. Even my mobile phone contract was on my husband's account because, why would I get it? I wouldn't have got a phone contract, years ago. And I still had a student account, bank account. So yeah, great things to go in and say, give me this prime West End property. This is my student account. Do you have a credit card? No. But, so I went in there completely convinced that I was going to get it. In my head, I had got it. In my head, I was that businesswoman who would shatter all the ceilings for someone who looked like me, who spoke like me, accented, Muslim, immigrant, older person, never done business before, no credit card with a student account. I was going to get that lease. And when they told me 55 people had applied for that lease, I still felt I was going to get it. But I still didn't call myself an entrepreneur. No. So the thing is that not being put in the box worked out to me my greatest strength. The fact that I didn't fit in. I didn't fit in with the kind of family I had. But I had the most awesome parents who were not bothered. My mother was like, just let her be, don't get after her. Let her be, let her be. She's not going to do this. She's not going to do that. And my mother also didn't force me to dress up and, conform to what was expected in my family, in this kind of very traditional clothes and, jewelry and things like that. So when I see all my childhood pictures, my sister dressed as a fairy, me looking like some dog has pulled out of the bushes. And I value her for having at that time, having two daughters, a second daughter, who looked pretty straggly and was not, how everybody else in the family looked. It was okay. So now when people ask me, that how does it feel to be the only female restaurateur, female Indian restaurateur in a male-dominated world, you are unusual. I've been there, done it from childhood.
Yeah. And is it acceptance we can talk about? I mean, I'm just thinking back, because you mentioned a lot the word accepted. And I was trying to figure out whether the true unconditional acceptance is there. And if so, when on that journey did you feel like, yeah, I got it, regardless of any choice I make in life?
I'm not sure. And maybe I haven't reached that point yet. I've never, ever set myself these landmarks that I had to hit. Because for me, I was very young and my father read this beautiful poem by a very difficult poet to understand in Urdu. And my Urdu is not good enough, which is my great, sadness. But roughly it translates that, it's a flight of a falcon in an open desert. And the person is telling the falcon, it's a great flight, but you have no idea. There are skies above that you haven't seen. Go fly above that, above what is, your accepted flight path for this. This is a desert, and they fly in the desert, and it's, quite impressive. You'll see them in Pakistan as well. The falcon
yeah.
in Pakistan.
I was about to ask if it's Rumi, but might not be.
No, it's not Rumi. It's Iqbal. It's Iqbal, Pakistani poet. But this whole thing that there are skies that you don't see, but you fly. And my father used to always tell me this, that, go above that sky. The sky doesn't end where you think it does. There is another sky above that. And, when you grow up listening to stuff like this and you're told, so I never set myself a target because I know there's another sky above that, which I need to conquer. And I would. So I just keep moving forward. I don't set myself any target. I don't call myself an entrepreneur. I don't call myself anything. I'm still finding the next sky.
It's interesting what you're saying about avoiding the labels, but I will stick with the labels for the ease of the conversation, because most of the people who build a business and build a successful business, and people who have actually kind of created a voice for themselves, but also for a community they represent, they've done this because ultimately they didn't want to leave this world at the end without having left a mark.
Yeah.
Right. So there is something which you see in a lot of the people who have been driving a business, an idea, whatever it is, and they manage to actually, or not manage, but people who actually come to that point where there is no longer a line between a personal life and a professional life. It's always driven by some sort of chip on their shoulder, right? I've always struggled to articulate that chip on my shoulder to my folks because they're a very conventional Greek family and they struggled. I was a golden boy, but then when I came out as gay to them, it was like the whole world fell apart.
Yeah.
So suddenly I gave the golden boy a spin, but I could practically kind of pick myself up again when I was telling them about my professional success, which was understandable in the corporate world. The moment I decided I'm no longer going to be corporate, I'm doing my own thing, they just couldn't understand it until they saw me on television. And suddenly it was a trade-off, right? But for me, it also meant that in my low moments when I was struggling with my entrepreneurial journey, I did not have family to rely on. I couldn't go to them and say, guys, I'm really struggling at the moment, because I felt that for them, I needed to deliver what they needed, which was a successful child. And I'm trying to kind of sort of also draw in a little bit from your Netflix movie, but also how I got to know you. How's that working in your situation? Because on the one side, you're this very confident, very successful, very kind of, well, you're a celebrity, right? So it's within your world. I mean, everybody knows Asma, right? And thanks to Netflix, everybody knows Asma, and everybody makes it difficult for me to get a table at Darjeeling Express, but that's a different story. How do you do this? Do you have moments where you feel, I can't talk about this to my parents, I can talk about everything, but at the same time, I am their kind of success story. So if I show some weakness, they will not be able to help me, or they will not want to hear it?
I think I'm very lucky. I think that my parents are very open to this communication. Often I would choose not to talk to them so that they would not worry. But they never, my mother would sense from my voice often that I was struggling. And it was a deliberate decision not to communicate with my parents. I'm very, very close to my siblings, and who are very, very chilled out, non-judgmental people. And, my cheerleaders, very proud of me, but understand that, I hit a lot of hurdles along my way. It's not always been smooth sailing. And when I hit a hurdle, I, would often talk to them, get a lot of strength of them. But I also have been fortunate to have a very close network of women who, friends, we have a common friend who's one of them, who I've met relatively late, but who has helped me enormously. But in every stage of my life, I have always had someone like Vincy. I've always had someone who is not from my culture, not from my background, who I did not have to explain who I was, but who took, this is our situation right now. Oh my God, we're in huge hell. We've got to find a way out. We've got to do this, we've got to do that. So the thing is that it actually was a lot easier. So I have always been able to find a support system. I never made friends with people so that they would later on be able to support me. It's just worked out that way. Also, I have personally been someone who a lot of Asian women come to talk. And, and also have a very big network of young Asian, boys who have issues with sexuality. One of the big things we did, which was before I opened my restaurant, was to have a Bollywood dance party with all my women, all of traditional thing, with a very large Asian gay, party. And there were all these boys who were embracing all my, chefs, saying, we've never been able to do this. And you allowed us to celebrate. And we all danced together. It was crazy. And I was a bit worried about, how, more traditional, more kind of less, less liberal-minded women who work with me, how they would deal with when I came and told them that we were going to do the first gay iftar. This was after the shooting. And I did this with someone who asked me, and they were like, oh, no, we're going to do it. So they also realized that for me, I had become that wall on which so many other people came and leant against. In this way, I also learned how to be able to pick up when I was suffering. I didn't mask it. I didn't hide it. I picked up my own signals so quickly because I met so many people, many of them having issues with sexuality, with acceptance, with their faith, how their family sees it, how they see it, with lots of issues. And I've always, since I moved to this country, became this kind of almost mother figure to so many people. And I think that I recognize within myself, and I'm not doing so well. I'm a bit stuck. I pick it up much faster because I've seen so many people going through this and not picking up these signals themselves. And I think that I'm very good at understanding myself. And I was able to find people who I could communicate with, often who came first to me with their problems. And so the gate had opened of communication. So I have always ended up, leaning on people, asking for their advice, getting their support, because I did it first. I was the person they often came to because they were suffering. And then when I was in trouble, I think I'm just been very lucky that I've always found someone exactly who I thought would understand, because I knew that they'd been through something similar. So it's always been this, that my family, my mother and father have always left at the very end in case it really was a bad situation. Otherwise, it's always been my siblings. And then a lot of these are friends, but they're friends who I was a anchor for in some ways. And when I was drifting, I went to them, and it worked out beautifully.
You are listening to Naked by The Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core.
Hey, I loved in the movie, you mentioned actually, you called your chefs your sisters. Yeah. And when I heard that, the picture I had in my mind was exactly from the, in the tech world, we use these like co-founders and, this family which found the business together. And I thought about your story and I was thinking, yeah, these are your co-founders indeed. Yeah. And I was thinking about the strength of that bond. And yeah, anything to share about that, like how the importance of that for you?
Yeah, the thing is that, in Pakistan, you won't see it so much, but in India, we are a very divided society. We're divided by wealth, by caste, by religion. The women who I call my sisters, who are the backbone of Darjeeling Express, to whom this whole enterprise actually belongs, were people who I would never have even met. I may have seen them in the railway station when I went to pick up my random relatives, but I wouldn't have even talked to them. I would have had no reason to speak to them unless they worked as servants in my house. There's a huge class difference. There's a huge gap in education. Some of the women never, unfortunately, went to school. One of them speaks English with a Peppa Pig accent, because when she was a nanny, she learned to speak English watching Peppa Pig. And I was like, whoa, you sound like Peppa Pig. But yeah, she learned to speak English. She was taught by a 4-year-old. When she was her nanny, she learned to speak. She speaks, like Peppa Pig. We all forgive her for that. But it's So we would never have sat down and had a meal together. We would never have even met. We wouldn't have gone to the same cafes, the restaurants. We may have met on the street and made eye contact. But the way we met in my house in London, there was, at that point, we were all equal. And for them, this was a unique experience. I mean, they all stood and were not willing to sit on my dining table with me. And I said, you sit first, then I sit. And they all did. Because that gesture, because I was seen as, they all know I'm royalty. They all knew my family background. But the culture is you don't sit till the person who's more important sits down. I mean, I think in Greek culture as well, till if you get up the moment an adult walks into the room, because, you must give your seat to them. Even if there are enough chairs, you do get up. If your grandfather walks in, you get up. You don't keep sitting. I mean, that's at least in, traditional Indian culture. So they all came very much from there. So when in that one first meeting, the barriers came down because I made that clear to them that they were equal to me. And I felt so excited that they had come to my house and, breaking bread with them. Again, many Indians would not eat with each other because of caste. I'm Muslim. None of them are Muslims. They're all Hindus. Some of them are vegetarians, quite strict. Yet they're happy to, eat from my kitchen, from my pan, from my plate. These are things that don't happen. And I think when you start like that, a journey, which began with friendship and embracing each other, the sisterhood grew from that moment where I told them this house is always for you. And soon they would be coming here at 2:00. The school pickup is at 3:30, 1.5 hours early. We were in the area. I said, yeah, come up, we'll have tea. We'll have tea and you'll eat samosas and chat. And that, because I think they realized that, I was very lonely as well. I was very lonely, and I understood in their eyes that emptiness of belonging nowhere. I had been through that journey myself. So I was still in that state. I'd had, my children. And the irony of it is I still felt bereft in some ways because I wasn't with my own mother and my father and family. And so this kind of grieving for something that you cannot get, they also were grieving, but they actually didn't have their family with them. So many of them really kind of were happy to meet my children. None of these women have family. All their family, the husbands, parents, children, are back home. It's a typical immigrant story. But I understood grief. I understood yearning for home. And they could sit here and weep, because they didn't have to hide it. They didn't have to be brave. And they could say how unhappy they were because they couldn't say it to their family, who would be panicked that, oh my God, she's coming back, who's going, because what they earn here supported 15, 20 people back there. So when you couldn't say that I can't take it and I cannot breathe, and I could say it to them, how I felt I wasn't living. I felt I was drifting. And I could say it to them. They no longer had to pretend.
Yeah, it was liberating.
It was liberating. Yeah. That is what really got us together. And then the supper clubs, the business, the restaurant, Netflix, the fame, the fortune, all of that came else later on. Mm. The real kind of bonding happened over my dining table, sitting and drinking tea, listening to music that our parents used to listen to. And it was really nice because we're not all the same age, but we all heard the same music, and which our parents liked a lot. And it was just an enjoyment, a oneness. And music was a big role, food was the other. So over food and music and stories, we formed a bond that is so strong that, It's unshakable. I, cannot see anyone leaving me, and I will never leave them.
Is it maybe okay to put a slightly different lens to the word family? Because I remember in the movie, you talk about you're doing the supper club, it's going really well, you're having a lot of fun with it. And suddenly your family, your children tells you, Mom, please stop doing that. So it's quite one thing to kind of go back and look at the support you get from your roots. And it's another one to look at the people that are surrounding you on a day to day. How was that? Because you only touch upon very briefly. Are your kids and your husband, how do they feel about Asma now?
I'm not so sure about my husband. I'm not so foolish to ask him what he feels. He refused to be in Netflix, despite Netflix begging him, pleading, crying and weeping, this entire 16 people in my house, asking him just like 2 minutes, please. He refused. He refused to talk to them. As you know, as you've seen, he's not in the film. My husband always told me that I would, that he appreciated my intelligence, my politics, my compassion to help other women, and felt that I would never achieve any of that through food. That as a lawyer and as someone who actually did really well in law school, did a PhD, which was very well, was appreciated, with the opportunity to teach and to do research in an area which has not got people who look like me, who are like me. He felt that it would be, I could do a lot of interesting stuff on immigration, on rights. So he was right, looking at me, that this was something. And there was no Asma Khan then. I'd never seen a person using food for politics, who used a business to create a conversation about rights. And I'd never seen anything like this. So I couldn't even tell him, I want to be like her. I want to follow her footsteps. There was nobody who was like me. So I would just listen to him saying, look at the food world. Where are you going to go? Who's going to give you money? What's going on? All of that makes sense. So he was very, very dismissive, telling me I would just fail because this was not the world where I belonged. And I could stay as a lawyer where there were other people doing stuff, interesting stuff, and I would find my path. And he himself is an academic, so, I know, there are friends. I know what an academic's life is. He's a professor in economics. But the thing is that he never, ever thought I was going to make it, never thought my food was good enough. He doesn't like my food at all. So he's someone who actually has he doesn't eat my food. He's never enjoyed it. And so it was so from him, there was a lot of hostility. And this is why I had to lie about the supper clubs. Not lie, didn't tell him. So he didn't know. He didn't know. House was so clean after he came back. It was a favor. I was doing a favor for him. I was cleaning the house a lot. The fact that 40 people came and messed it up and left, he didn't need to know. And I never told my children, don't tell Baba. They never told him. I have incredible boys. They never told him. They just kept silent. And I never said anything to him that, something, while you were away, Mama did this big party. No, never, ever. And I never told them, don't lie. But I think it became too much. The kids were putting up signs outside their door saying no entry because a lot of people trying to find the bathroom would walk into their rooms. They were shoved to one end of the house. And it wasn't that, if I had a supper club on a Saturday and Sunday, from Friday the confusion would start. From Thursday the chaos would start. And the whole weekend would go away. Their weekend was wiped away. They couldn't even come out. There were tables everywhere. There were chairs. They were shooed out of the kitchen. The whole kitchen was full of people cooking and cleaning and washing up. I think they felt they didn't have a life, on a weekend. When their father was not there, they were just in their rooms, locked up. And when I realized, I felt very guilty because I actually had not realized that they were suffering so much, because they never said anything to me except for the no entry signs that came up towards the last few supper clubs, which I thought was, how odd that my kids are putting up these signs, but didn't really understand. And I was so ashamed that I had not picked up, because for me, I always saw the trouble. See, you'll focus on the person you think is the biggest trouble. For me, my biggest trouble was my husband. He was the person who, if he found out, would be, apart from everything else, very angry that I was lying. And also because I knew he would not approve. And in focusing on how he would react and making sure he didn't find out, I kind of just ignored the kids in this whole process. And it was very humbling to know that, I have children who for a long time put my happiness above their own till it got too much. And they were scared that they could see how happy it made me. And they were very upset when I started saying, fine, I'm going to stop. Because they said, is there any other way you can do it somewhere else so that, everyone, so we can just come out to the kitchen. So it was they were very understanding, not aggressive, very emotional when I told them, no, I will stop. I said, no, I will stop. And they was like, no, don't, because what are you going to do then? And I was like, no, I'll find a way. I apologize. And I'm really sorry. And all the girls were also very apologetic to the kids. They all got lots of Kit Kats. And we all said sorry to them. And that we we had not realized that we are actually oppressing them. And all of us who have been through oppression as children in our families, growing up as girls, it felt really bad. It felt really bad that we had behaved in a patriarchal way. We were being like the patriarchs who didn't even ask our opinions when we were girls in families because we didn't count. And I had not asked my children, is it okay? Are you all okay? Never asked them. Because I had a great time and I thought they would be fine. They were not fine, but I never asked them. I realized that, we had become, I was telling all the women, we are behaving like, the men in our families, which is awful because nothing can be worse than that, being patriarchal. And I think it gave all of us a real shock. We felt, all of us were really bad. I mean, I was, of course, the most hurt. And I got then huge shouting from my parents who were very angry with me for having, not taken care of the kids. Then the story ended completely. So yeah, it was not nice.
Thank you for sharing. There's a lot of learning for all of us. And I'm thinking that when we go on that journey, of following the dreams and the passion, I think we, in one way or the other, sometimes we just lose track and we get blinded by it and we embrace and immerse fully. But this ability for you to reflect and for your kids to actually kick your ass in a way and say like, Mama, I think that's, it's a very strong message and such a learning, right? For you and for us now when you were sharing it. Has it changed in any way now when Asma has her own restaurant, there is a place they can come in? How that has impacted the relationship?
I mean, the thing is that it's worth mentioning that, my investor who was going to invest in the restaurant changed the terms of agreement the night before, where suddenly he became co-owner of the restaurant. At that time, of course, the restaurant was a huge risk. I may have failed, I may have succeeded. For the amount of money that he was giving me, I hung up, I sat on the floor, just behind where this computer is, and I wept. I cried for, I think, an hour. I was just so overwhelmed that some man was using money to chain me. I've broken every chain, and I've always fought to break the chains of others. And here, because he was giving me this money for my restaurant, I was going to be put into a cage. And I wept a lot. And my husband passed me and was like, oh, wow, so interesting. You're this great warrior, great princess, and you're crying. And, I've never seen you cry. And so, obviously I've never cried in front of him because that's below me. I will not cry in front of anyone. I will cry, but I will cry alone. And I was like, I was just weeping. I was just heartbroken because I realized that this investor is an asshole. But if I don't have the money tomorrow, I can't exchange. And, what will I say to the landlord? That, because the money from the bank had been organized, but that was based on me being able to deposit this investor's money first, then the bank's money would come in, and then I would pay the landlord a small portion of the money. And I called all my friends who are rich, who are not that rich, because maximum I could get was 800 quid from someone. I can give you 800 quid tomorrow. I said, what the? You have like an expensive car. Where's your bloody money? They was like, it's invested. Do you think? I had no idea. Rich people bloody don't have money in their accounts. You think everyone who's rich has lots of money? No one had money. I was like, I'm just horrified. I'll never think you're rich again. No one had money. I mean, this was like the biggest, largest amount was 800 quid, which was what? I needed 185,000. And my husband then came to me and said, I have given you my life savings, 185,000 pounds. It will hit your account. And it was really strange. I got up and shook his hand. And he left. And I tried to impress him by washing all his clothes. So he didn't change his mind. And he watched me wash all his clothes. He'd be telling me for a long time to wash his clothes. I even separated the whites. I ironed everything. When I finished all his clothes, he told me, because I kept checking on my phone, the money, it didn't come. On my phone app, there was no money. So I thought he just told me and went away. I was too scared to go and ask him, did you change your mind? I told the kids, your father's giving you all his money. They were saying, oh, wow, this is great. This is so exciting. I said, everyone stay away from him. Let's not make any noise because he can change his mind. And then when I finished ironing all his clothes, he told me, it's okay. I had no more clothes for you to wash or iron. Just want to tell you, because I didn't know. I had a student account and nobody had given me any money before this, that it won't show till the next morning, because that's how it works. Now I know that if you pay the money after a certain time at night, it doesn't come. My husband knew. He watched me wash all his clothes. And I was like, I sat and cried again. He told me, like, you're so stupid. You now know the money is gone. He showed me on his account, the money went. He said, it's gone to you. And Netflix wanted to ask him why he invested in me after having criticized me always. Now, if anyone invests in me, it's so easy. I'm successful. Mm-hmm. At that time, I was nobody. I had nothing. So he told me, I'm not going to talk to Netflix because they're going to ask me why I invested in you that night when you sat there crying. I don't want to answer this question. My attitude to Netflix was, you guys are going to mess up my life. I am not going to force him to talk to you guys because I'd much rather have my husband's money than him telling me I'm smart, I'm beautiful, I'm successful. I don't care. I want his money. I'd rather have his money. I take his money and I ran. I don't want to do a post-mortem on his, why did you give me the money? Do you really think I'm successful? Do you think I'm an entrepreneur? We don't talk about it. We still don't talk about it. 3 years down the line, he sees me in the Financial Times and this, that, the other. So when my name comes out in really big publications, I just had something in GQ, I sent it to the New York Times. So I just sent it to him saying, isn't this very cool? No response. He never responds to anything I sent him. It's all fine. He gave me the money. I don't care.
You are listening to Naked by The Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core.
The children's attitude towards the restaurant, it's interesting because I realize now that his whole life he'd been practicing for social distancing. He doesn't want to be near people. He doesn't like people. He's like my husband. My husband likes students. He doesn't like people. My younger child also doesn't like people. Hopefully, when he does something in his life, he will like the people he likes working with. But he's very much like my husband. It's amazing how someone can be born like that. But, and all my kind of being surrounded by people, this child avoids us all. So yeah, he's a social distancing kid. But now we know how, we have a label for him. Although I wouldn't put the label on him, but yeah, he's that. So he has come to the restaurant once. complete. Once he came with my parents because they told him he had to come. My older one thinks I'm great, brings his friends, thinks I'm, I noticed one thing, that every post I put up on social media, he's one of the first persons who likes it. He will also tell me when I've made spelling mistakes. He checks everything I do. He's extremely proud. He told me, don't come to my university because I don't want everyone to see who you are, because they'll think that, they'll steal my food because they'll know that you're cooking it. And also, I don't want you to be. But I had to go because there was a crisis and there was something. I had to go to his. And when I walked into his hall, I saw the way everyone looked at me, and I thought, they all know who I am. So one of them came and said, Aris, my son, called everyone to his room and showed them the Netflix in his room, that this is my mother. So I said, okay, so he's proud of me. But he was like, don't come because I'm too ashamed. You know how it is. But my younger one is not at all. I mean, he's in fact horrified. I'm someone that someone can see on TV. I wasn't allowed to go to parent-teacher meeting because his English teacher told him that she thought I was very inspirational. He was like, I am so embarrassed. She saw you on TV. You can't come for parent-teacher meeting. So I didn't go. My husband went. So it's very different reaction. One child is very proud of me, very excited, shows off to everyone, wants to bring friends to the restaurant, and is, I think, someone who would like to continue and take over my business. The girls teasingly always call him Chota Malik, which in my culture is the young lord, young owner, the new owner. So yeah, he's called that. But they all like him a lot because he always washed pots. He helped them. He used to help washing pots. And when I had issues in the restaurant, he came to clean the floors and things like that. I think there has a lot of respect for him from the team, because they know that he's someone who has actually physically contributed to helping us when we were, early days and everything. So he's kind of been very much part of the journey. But the other two are people who just look from outside. They're not heckling, but they're looking. That's it.
Thank you. It's wonderful to listen to your story, but also you talk about these things with such a candor and about a lot of things other people would never share in public. So it's really, it's just amazing to hear the story. There's in our kind of conversations we've had so far, we realized that people sometimes don't have the vocabulary to identify what's going on. And you very articulately kind of present how you actually have an awareness because of your own experience. And you seem to be creating your own networks for resources. But are there moments where you just sit there in your room and maybe not on your kitchen floor and you go, I don't know what's going on, but this isn't good. And you draw to something else to give you that strength to bounce back from it. People have different tools. We had a wonderful conversation not that long ago about hallucinogenic drugs. We had conversations about all sorts of things. I'm just curious to know, in your case, what other resources, other than your networks, other than the people that you go to, that help you regain that strength and solve a conflict or overcome a problem?
My faith. I'm deeply spiritual. I read a lot of Rumi. I listen to poetry on my father reading poetry. My father reading poetry of this. My father reading Rumi, but my father also reading a lot of things that I grew up listening to at home. So Urdu poetry. My father reading very poetical verses from the Quran. The Quran is a very poetic book. Most people don't understand that. There's a lot of poetry there, which is very beautiful. I've always seen it as a book of poetry. And so I listen to that. I also listen to a lot of music. Again, Sufi music, very spiritual music, very rhythmic. So these are kind of music that you hear in the shrines in Pakistan and India, where there's a rhythmic clapping. There's a clapping and there's a beat. And in that beat, there's a healing that you get from listening to that rhythm. That rhythm is always very uplifting. It's Qawwali, and I play it in my restaurant towards the end of my service. I'm always amazed at the number of people who tell me, what is that? it's doing something to me over here in my heart. I said, yeah, this is the call of my soil, the beat, my heartbeat. That's what you're hearing. That rhythm of Islam, of Sufi Islam. So the Islam of my childhood, the rhythm of Sufi Islam, which goes from Central Asia into India to Turkey, that links all these people who can then spin and lose complete awareness of what is around them. That gives me strength. I don't spin, but I am in some ways. I listen to that music, and that kind of moves me and takes me to a place where, there is a word that Rumi used, which is nothingness. I am taken to that point of nothingness, where I am nothing. Then any problems I have is a problem which I solve. So I listen to this music. I listen to poetry, and I also write a lot of poetry. Recently, I've been writing a lot of poetry. I'm too embarrassed to make it public, but I write a lot of very spiritual things in different languages. Sometimes in the same poem, I switch between English and Urdu and Arabic, because I'm all of that. But there's a rhythm, which is that rhythm of Sufi Islam. And that is where my strength comes from. And this is why I say this with complete conviction. If I am defeated, it is because I chose to be defeated. I will never be defeated by someone else, because I have the tools. I have the beat that will take me to another place. And I will pull myself out of every hole, every difficult position I'm in, because this is how I have won every battle. I visualize myself winning every time. For me, defeat is never an option, but I use music and poetry to get there.
Sometimes we have these conversations and we're trying to figure out, how do we introduce the end? How do we start wrapping up? But that's where you just literally, in all this conversation, you've just been delivering every single piece by yourself. You didn't need us for any of this. It's been, what I'm trying to say is actually this was a beautiful thing to end on. I mean, the way you kind of described not just kind of the meditative approach to looking at recovery, right?
Yeah.
And strength. It's I'm Vladi, I don't know what you think.
No, I'm thinking actually very clearly I'm gonna play some Sufi music right after this one. So yeah, that's what on my plan. Asma, we have this one question we ask every of our interviews at the end, which is around, was there a question, or now if you think back when you were starting on your journey, do you think that would be a question, if you could ask at that time to another entrepreneur, you wish that you could have asked that? What would it be?
No.
There is no such question.
I had no questions. I had no questions at that time, because I knew what was happening. I was never confused. I was never alone. So, you ask questions but I was always surrounded by a support system. The questions never came up. So I don't know. The honest truth, if I think a lot, they may have been something, but my instinct was that I never had any confusion about, anything that I couldn't understand, except, I should say, anything to do with tech. When I got my new phone, I had to take it to a friend to put the SIM card in and activate my phone. I didn't know how to do backup on iCloud. So these are the only things that has hampered me in my life. Once I figure that out, I will be invincible. No, but that's the only thing. But yeah, so no.
There is one more, which is around, we try to find out if you think that there are topics which we talk very little about publicly. And if so, which are those?
I think the topic that is really important to discuss is the mindset of so many women, the insecurities that women have about failure, the fact that you do not have enough women, you cannot be what you cannot see. And I think it's really important that, like what you guys are doing, that you actually bring on people who are diverse, accented, where it is very clear they're from two cultures, the East and the West. You give people that hook that, she may understand, and let me listen to what she says. It's very important that voices come on the table who are different, because I think that this is going to be very, very important, that, this changes the way that, others look at a particular industry. And I think that's a very significant thing, that there isn't enough diversity. You see too many people who look the same doing something. Yeah. You don't feel you belong.
It's very
much more
very
about, and it was a lot more. Sorry, it was a wider conversation than just the entrepreneurial journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's ultimately about why are we doing this?
Yeah, I was mesmerized really by the lightness by which she was actually telling us about who she is and the life she's living and the choices how she's making it. It's inspiring for me, certainly. That's the piece I'm still kind of, and I guess it will take me some time to absorb and reflect on.
I think it's interesting to talk to somebody has got their own way of phrasing things and articulating things. But ultimately going back to some of the key concepts that we've seen, right? You can call it faith, you can call it poetry, you can call it a state of nothingness through Sufi music. But ultimately, it's a form of meditation, right? It's a form of introspection and calmness, right? Which is what every mindfulness app you can download today is ultimately trying to achieve. It's just a different path to that, right? In the same way that when Asma was talking about at the beginning about the different networks that she has to tap into when she needs a particular type of support, right? But really eye-opening for me to go, and the reason I knew how to do this is because I've been doing this for other people. So also that element of self-reflection and being able to say, look, this is our function. And then I'm sure it comes with age, I'm sure it comes with having your own family, but that awareness that we sometimes kind of realize that some of our other guests didn't have.
Yeah, so she went so smoothly from being absolutely vulnerable to a moment of absolute trust into who she is, which is so beautiful to see, right? This contrast. And for me, there was a lot, it stood up as a maturity. And some of it, what you were saying around reflection, the ability to know yourself. And not to kind of reflect too much on Asma, but I think another concept which for me was really powerful, which came out from this conversation, was around the acceptance, the unconditional acceptance. And I think a lot of us, and not just entrepreneurs, but now speaking about entrepreneurs, when we decide to go on our journey, which we believe is, or we tailor it to who we are, right? And it's just not accepted a lot of time by the closest ones, where we actually seek that unconditional acceptance and love. And I think that's a big one to kind of find a way around it and work through it, maybe find and build another family unit while maybe still reconciling with what do I have in my roots, right? That was powerful for me. This concept of sisterhood, right? And how she really talks about the chefs as the sisters. And I was watching it and I was like, yeah, that's the co-founders concept, right? And how interesting it is, because now we have such a variety of founders and entrepreneurs on the podcast, and they talk about the same thing, but with different words. And I was just thinking about it, that, yeah, indeed, there are a lot of different bits, but actually the path, the journey of an entrepreneur has so much of commonality, regardless whether you are tech in Silicon Valley or actually a restaurant owner, What do you think?
Yes and no. I agree with the statement. The one thing I realize is, though, that most of the people we've had on the podcast actually didn't really have that. Not in the same way.
You mean the family unit?
No, not the family unit, just a bunch of co-founders. I mean, most of the people we've spoken to have had a relationship. A lot of the conversation we had was other people doing this by themselves, having co-founder conflict.
Yeah, that was craving for somebody like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we had the lack of it. Mm-hmm. That's what we had. But we didn't really have a model of, I found these people organically, and we were ultimately united by the same interests. So we overcame our differences because of that kind of unifying dream. And now it is tight-knit group, and different people are doing different things within the business. But it's the faces you see on the program, and they all started by kind of, having one interest, which was one shared experience, which was the loneliness.
You're right in terms of reflecting on, not just the stories on the podcast, but a lot of, stories around us in the life. I guess it comes to really on what basis do you come together and decide to build this together, right? Is it the financial motive that pulls you in? Is it experience in terms of backgrounds and stuff? Because it is true, is that what I've heard there with Asma and the sisterhood, I did think about us as well in terms of that, vulnerable experience we kind of have and shared, which brought us together.
You've been listening to Naked by The Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. To learn more about our work, sign up to our newsletter or visit thefuturefarm.co, where you can also apply to be a Naked guest. Naked is produced by Dan Turgel, coordinating producer Alena Zamirova, and edited by Catherine Dworkin.
And remember to subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help us share it with the world.